Chapter 7: How to Design, Organize, Implement, and Maintain Information Technology Security Policies. Learning Objective and Key Concepts. Learning Objective is describe how to design, organize, implement, and maintain IT security policies. The key concepts include core principles of policy and standards design, implementing policies and libraries, policy change control board purpose and roles, business drivers for policy and standards changes, best practices for policy management and maintenance. Policies and standards design considerations. The best kinds of documents are clearly worded, address 6 key questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how, and they are concise and precise. Challenge is how to establish or recognize a core set of beliefs that can influence how policies are written. One method, break the problem down into how security controls are to be implemented and what controls are needed. Operating models. Diversified operating model. The technology solution has a low level of integration and standardization with the enterprise. Typically, the exchange of data and use of services outside the business unit itself is minimal. Coordinated operating model. The technology solution shares data across the enterprise. However, the level of shared services and standardization are minimal. In a replicated operating model, the technology solution shares services across the enterprise. However, the level of data sharing is minimal. In a unified operating model, the technology solution both shares data and has standardized services across the enterprise. Principles for policy and standards development. Accountability principle. The personal responsibility of information system security should be explicit. Some roles in the organization are accountable only for the work they perform daily. Other roles are accountable for their own work, plus all the work performed by their team of employees. Accountability helps to ensure that people understand they are solely responsible for the actions they take while using organization resources. You can think of accountability as a deterrent control. Awareness principle. Owners, providers, and users of information systems, as well as other parties, should be informed of the existence and general context of policies, responsibilities, practices, procedures, and organization for security of information systems. Put more simply, it is unlikely that stakeholders will comply with policies they are not aware of. Ethics principle. The way information systems are designed and the level of access to data reflected in the security controls should operate in accordance with the organization's ethical standards. This includes the level of disclosure and access to customer data. This also needs to be entrenched in the organizational culture in order to be effective. Multidisciplinary principle. Policy and standards library documents should be written to consider everyone affected, including technical, administrative, organizational, operational, commercial, educational, and legal personnel. Proportionality principle. Security levels, cost, practices, and procedures should be appropriate and proportionate to the value of the data and the degree of reliance on the system. They should also be proportional to the potential severity, probability, and extent of harm to the system or loss of the data. In other words, don't spend $1,000 to protect $500 worth of assets. Integration principle. Your documents should be coordinated and integrated with each other. They should also integrate with other relevant measures, practices, and procedures for a coherent system of security. We continue with page 2 of Principles for Policy and Standards Development. Defense in depth principle. Security increases when it is implemented as a series of overlapping layers of controls and countermeasures that provide three elements to secure assets: prevention, detection, and response. This is referred to as defense in depth. In both a military concept and an information security concept, defense in depth dictates that security mechanisms be layered so that the weaknesses of one mechanism are countered by the strengths of two or more other mechanisms. This is a core security concept. Timeliness principle. All personnel, assigned agents, and third-party providers should act in a timely and coordinated manner to prevent and to respond to breaches of the security. Reassessment principle. The security of information systems should be periodically reassessed. Risks to technology change daily, and periodic reassessments are needed to ensure that security requirements and practices are kept current with these changes. Standards also need reassessments, at least annually, to ensure they represent the current state of affairs. Privacy principle. The security of an information system should include secure private information of users of the system. In other words, consider your users or partners when requiring information that could place their privacy rights at risk. Internal control principle. Information security forms the core of an organization's information internal control systems. Regulations mandate the internal control systems be in place and operating correctly. Organizations rely on technology to maintain business records. It's essential that such technology include internal control mechanisms. These maintain the integrity of the information and represent a true picture of the organization's activities. Adversary principle. Controls, security strategies, architectures, and policy library documents should be developed and implemented in anticipation of attack from intelligence, rational and irrational adversaries who may intend harm. This is also the case with threat assessment. Page 3 of Principles for Policy and Standards Development. Least privilege principle. People should be granted only enough privilege to accomplish assigned tasks and no more. This is another core principle of security. Next is separation of duty principle. Responsibilities and privileges should be divided to prevent a person or a small group of collaborating people from inappropriately controlling multiple key aspects of a process and causing harm or loss. For example, in an accounting department, the person preparing invoices for payment should not be the same person writing the checks for payment. Continuity principle. Identify your organization's needs for disaster recovery and continuity of operations. Prepare the organization and its information systems accordingly. Simplicity principle. Try to favor small and simple safeguards over large and complex ones. Security is improved when it's made simpler. Obviously, security should not be oversimplified, but instead make as simple as practically possible. Last, policy-centered security. These are policy standards and procedures should be established as the formal basis for managing the planning, control, and evaluation of all information security activities. Last page for Principles of Policy and Standards Development. It says some specific steps that should be taken when developing security policies. Risk identification. Always begin by identifying the risks that the policies are trying to mitigate. Legal compliance. Make certain that policies comply with any legal or regulatory requirements. And practicality. Make sure the policy is something you can implement and enforce. The importance of transparency with regard to customer data. Organizations should be transparent and should notify individuals of the collection, use, dissemination, and maintenance of personally identifiable information, otherwise known as PII. PII information that can be used to identify a specific person. This can be something used alone, such as a person's name. The non-public personal information, NPI, used by the Graham-Lynch-Bliley Act, uses to refer to any personally identifiable financial information that a consumer provides to a financial institution. The importance of transparency with regard to customer data. Individual participation, consent in the collection, use, and dissemination and maintenance of PII. Purpose specification. Describe authority that permits the collection of PII and articulate the purpose or purposes for which they intend to use data. Data minimalization. Collect PII that is directly relevant and necessary to accomplish specified purposes. Retain PII only for as long as it is necessary. Use limitation. Use PII solely for the purpose specified. Types of controls for policies and standards. First is administrative, the policies and standards and procedures that guide employees when conducting the organization's business. Examples include pre-employment screening of personnel and change management process. Technical, the devices, protocols, and other technology used to protect assets. For example, antivirus systems, cryptographic systems, and firewalls. Physical, the devices used to control physical access. Example could be fences, security guards, locked doors, motion detectors, and alarms. Types of controls for policies and standards. Second page. Preventive security controls. Prevent intentional or unintentional security threats. Examples include network access policies, firewall rules, and locks on wiring closets, and server room doors. Detective or responsive controls. Act like alarms and warnings. These controls kick in after an incident begins. Examples include motion detectors, log files, and files that contain system and audit information. Corrective controls. Help you respond to fix a security incident. Corrective controls are also used to limit or stop further damage. Some examples include cleaning a virus off of a system, closing a firewall port, and blocking an internet protocol address, IP address. Recovery controls help you put a system back into operation once an incident ends. Disaster recovery and tape backups fit into this category. There is a significant overlap between security control categories. Some controls can be administrative and preventive, or technical and corrective, or combination thereof. This overlap occurs by design for the purpose of implementing the principle of defense in depth. Document organization considerations. Although there are many ways to organize a library of policies, one thing they all have in common is the need for a numbering scheme. A numbering scheme helps you organize the material by topic. It becomes a quick reference point for people to use to refer to specific content. You can create your own numbering scheme or use an existing one. Should you decide to use an existing framework like ISO/IEC 27002, you can begin with the taxonomy it provides. Figure 7.2-2 is a possible policy and standards library taxonomy. It gives you a view there of what it actually consists of. This figure shows how the control standards branch out from the Access Control IS-POL-800 framework policy. This figure shows the baseline standards and procedures which provide additional branches of the library tree. Figure 7-5 provides you an overlook of the guidelines that provide additional branches of the library tree. Considerations for implementing policies and standards. Building consensus on intent. Separating the writing of the actual policy language from the discussion of the intent of the policy change is a good way to build a consensus. During this step, you should discuss the drivers for the change in terms of the operating model and principles. This reinforces the shared beliefs and helps promote the desired culture. As much as possible, it is desirable to have a consensus on at least the purpose of a policy. You may or may not be able to achieve consensus on all the detailed items in a policy, but at least the purpose should be one that has a broad support. Reviews and approvals for your documents. Once they are written, you need to share your documents again with those who helped you develop them. Let those employees review the policy documents language well before you implement them. These reviews allow you to assess the impact of the policy or standard on the organization before deploying it in a potentially disruptive fashion. These reviews sometimes require you to revise parts of a policy or standard to allow for current conditions, or you may need to postpone implementing some controls until the environment is better prepared for compliance. Publication of documents. Publishing your policy and standards library depends on the communication tools available in your organization. Many organizations use some form of an intranet for internal communications. Different departments may have their own subsection of the intranet. An information system should have its own. An intranet generally has a front page or a portal that announces new content on the site. It also includes news, other announcements, access to standard forms, and so on. Awareness and training. Implementation requires educating personnel not only on each of the core values, but also on changing their role to emphasize protecting data and systems. Ongoing security awareness training, including training on new policies, is a critical aspect of policy implementation. Reviews and approvals. Of the document review, you have technical personnel reviewing it, you have legal personnel reviewing, human resource, and audit and compliance personnel. Policy Change Control Board. Change Control Board, or CCB, sometimes referred to as a Change Advisory Board. Effective oversight of policy changes ensures that security is implemented in a thoughtful way, and changes are not made unilaterally or cause unexpected consequences. And you have oversight of the policy change process is usually under a committee. Committee members are often senior leaders who represent technology and business interest. Policy Change Control Board. Objectives of the Policy Change Control Board are assess policies and standards and make recommendations for change, coordinate requests for change, RFCs, ensure that changes to existing policies and standards support the organization's mission and goals, review requested changes to the policy framework, and establish a change management process for policies and standards. Business drivers for policies and standards changes. Business exceptions. As the business changes, new systems or processes are introduced. They may vary from what a policy or standard requires. Business innovations. New opportunities for revenue growth or cost reduction can lead to innovative changes that were previously not considered. Standards may need to adapt to these innovations or be adjusted to permit innovations. Business technology innovations. New technology often comes with unknowable risk until you gain experience using it. Standards may need revisions to allow for the use of the new technology or for the use in new ways that were not envisioned when the standards were developed. Strategic changes. An organization may change its business model and come under new regulatory requirements. For example, an organization might purchase a bank to reduce the cost of credit card processing. In this case, changes to an existing standard are far-reaching and may affect every standard in place. Legal changes. There can be new laws or changes to existing laws that require business policy to change. The most obvious recent example of this is the GDPR in Europe. Any organization that does business in Europe must implement policies to adhere to the GDPR. Regulatory changes. If an organization's operations require compliance with some regulation, then any change in that regulation will likely lead to an update or a change to organizational policies. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI-DSS, is a good example. If an organization processes credit card data, then when PCI-DSS is updated or changed, the organization must make relevant changes to its own policies. A major revision significantly changes the policy. Examples include new requirements, new limitations, or expanded responsibilities. These types of changes should be sent to the Policy Change Control Board for consideration. Minor revisions. These usually have low significance. Example, clarifying wording within a sentence or a paragraph. Best practices for policies and standards maintenance. Base decisions on core information security principles to support business objectives. Establish a cohesive and coherent document organization taxonomy that leaves room for growth and changes. Use common templates for each type of document and stick with them. Use a collaboration tool for developing documents that allows others access to drafts early in the development cycle. It should be easy to solicit reviews and comments. Establish a repeatable review process for draft documents. Best practices for policies and standards maintenance. Publish the library in a form that the organization is already using to avoid confusion. Use a broad variety of communications and awareness media and techniques to reach a wide audience. Keep your message consistent and easy to understand. Establish a policy change control board to help identify major changes to the library and to keep it up to date. Create a lessons learned process to improve the policy through feedback and review of major events. Case studies and examples. The Cypress Springs Chamber wanted to address the security requirements of smart shipping, having digital records, interconnected ships, and electronic data exchange increased the efficiency of shipping, but also increased risk. In order to facilitate addressing these new security challenges, the company employed a case study approach. It took a case study of a specific subset of the company and used that as a template to study security. This can be an effective way to examine security policies. The approach includes framing specific organization concerns so they could be examined effectively, examining each organization's security concern using a scenario, taking that information to facilitate development of security policies. Private sector case study number 2. During an internal review, American Imaging Management, AIM, decided it needed to improve its due diligence practices. AIM decided to expand its corporate security program. The company began by performing a risk assessment on its current security program. The assessment used the ISO 27001 gap assessment methods. When complete, AIM delivered a recommended course of action. These activities were intended to address and remediate areas that were either under or over controlled. Using the plan to act check cycle from the 150 standards, AIM's activities included identifying more detailed roles and responsibilities, identifying all relevant security requirements, defining all supporting policies, standards, and procedures, and defining and establishing a security awareness program, expanding the organization's vulnerability management program, and collaborating with the business continuity disaster recovery team to integrate security program objectives, improving the incident response program, and implementing an internal security control audit program. Public sector case study. California Office to improve security in California's IT infrastructure, the Office of the State Chief Information Officer issued a new policy that includes employee remote access security standards for working from home or off-site. The policy also requires that state agencies complete a compliance form. The policy was issued to help state agencies develop secure remote access for employees and minimize security risk. In summary, we covered the core principles of policy and standards design, implementing policies and libraries, policy change control board purpose and roles, business drivers for policy and standards changes, and best practices for policy management and maintenance. Thank you for listening to this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.